Mike Evans knows what he's looking for, according to his agent. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Monday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Lots of rumblings regarding the Buccaneers from Jeremy Fowler coming out of Indianapolis, including Antoine Winfield Jr.'s future, as well as a player potentially on the trade block. More on that coming up in a little bit. But let's start with more news about Mike Evans that emerged over the weekend. This comes courtesy of Jordan Schhultz of Bleacher Report, who tweeted out that he spoke with Derek Gilmore, who is Mike Evans' agent, and he said, quote, Mike wants to play with an elite quarterback in an offense that will showcase him and be paid like a top wide receiver. He doesn't want to play with a rookie quarterback. Winning a Super Bowl is a key priority, end quote. Let's break this down a little bit. How many elite quarterbacks are there in the NFL? 3? 4? You have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. I think those 3 are locked and loaded as the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Beyond that, maybe Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's a 2-time MVP. I get it, but he's never thrown for over 4,000 yards in a season. He has thrown more than 30 touchdowns once in his career. And you could look at it and say, you know what? Lamar's receivers always kind of stink. They've been pretty bad over the years. And that probably plays into his statistical shortcomings when it comes to, the 4,000 yards, only throwing 30 touchdowns once. But even with that, I'm not sure that he's an elite quarterback. An elite athlete? Absolutely. No question about it. Elite quarterback? I'd say that's debatable. Who else could be in that conversation? I guess you could throw Aaron Rodgers out there, but given his age coming off of that injury, I slot him in as a maybe. Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott. I don't know if you can call any of those guys elite. So basically, you're looking at 3 locked and loaded elite quarterbacks and then 3 to 4 debatable ones. Is Evans only looking at Buffalo, Kansas City, and Cincinnati as potential destinations? Absolutely not. Out of those 3, Kansas City seems to be the only one that would actually be a fit. But if they're going to pay Chris Jones, it's going to take some serious cap gymnastics to pull off the deal for Mike Evans. And as Evan Klosky has mentioned before on his appearances on this show, if the Chiefs didn't pay Tyreek Hill, why would they pay Mike Evans? Mike Evans is older than Tyreek Hill. He's much older than Tyreek Hill was when the Chiefs weren't going to pay Tyreek Hill. And why would they turn around and give him the kind of money that Tyreek Hill is getting? It just doesn't seem to make any sense from that aspect, especially when the Chiefs are coming off of a season where they won a Super Bowl without paying big money at receiver. They also didn't have big production at receiver. So maybe this is one of those, we see the error in our ways. Maybe we should go ahead and invest, but the error in their ways still resulted in winning another Super Bowl. So elite is one of those terms in this scenario where it's really in the eye of the beholder. Baker Mayfield is not elite. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that he is, but Mike Evans loves him, and the two of them get along on and off the field really, really well. They work together really, really well. And, then you take a look at the next thing in that statement. He wants to be in an offense that showcases him. You mean like the offense that he was just in with Baker Mayfield and the one in Tampa that he would be in again this season? Here's the thing about Mike Evans. You can showcase him in any offense. It doesn't take much because his skill set fits anything you want to do. He is not speed reliant. You don't have to scheme him open. He is a contested catch monster. He is one of the best red zone targets in the NFL, and he can run any route on the tree. There is not a single offense in the NFL that couldn't showcase him. So that aspect of Gilmore's statement does not remove any teams from the equation. Finally, winning a Super Bowl is key. Are the Bucs Super Bowl contenders right now? Not really. But at the same time, many didn't think that they were playoff contenders heading into last season, and they made it to the divisional round. In the NFC, they can absolutely compete with anyone. And in the NFC South, they have just as good of a chance at winning that division as Atlanta or New Orleans. Carolina is still going to stink, so that's kind of whatever. So given the parameters of Gilmore's statement, the only team that Evans could wind up on that fits everything is Kansas City. And we know it's not Kansas City or bust for Mike Evans. So who could actually be in play for his services based off of what Gilmore said? Obviously, a return to Tampa seems like the most likely outcome. Kansas City is probably somewhat in the mix, but I don't see them paying a 31-year-old top receiver money after turning away their own top receiver over money. After that, you take a look at the Houston Texans, who are not Super Bowl contenders right now, this moment, but they could be within the range of Mike Evans' contract. So if they continue on that trajectory, maybe they are a box that, or they are a team that checks off all the boxes. Cincinnati, maybe, but only if they tag and trade Higgins. Jamar Chase is going to get a crazy huge deal, and his agent, I would guess, is waiting for Justin Jefferson's extension to go through so that he can strong arm the Bengals into topping it. I've mentioned the Lions on this show, who were just in the conference championship. Their quarterback definitely isn't elite, but they're going there to complement Amon-Ra St. Brown would take their offense to the next level. However, are they willing to pay Evans the kind of money that he wants, that top receiver money, when they have to sign St. Brown to a mega extension this year, or he's going to hit free agency next year? You could throw the Eagles out there too. I would throw them in the mix of Super Bowl contenders, but that makes the wide receiver room in Philadelphia really, really crowded. You have A.J. Brown, you have Devonta Smith there already. I'm not sure they would pay Evans as much or more than A.J. Brown, who is already getting $25 million a year, or invest that much into a free agent wide receiver when Devonta Smith will become a free agent after the season. They're probably going to want to keep their own. And you could see Evans not wanting to go to Philadelphia because the crowded receiving core would be a serious risk at his 1,000 yard streak. You look at teams like the Patriots, Commanders, Bears, Falcons, Broncos, Raiders, Seahawks, Vikings, Steelers, Giants, Colts, Cardinals, Saints, Panthers. They're all out of the mix for one reason or another, but mostly because of their current quarterback situations. The Bills, I think, are out. They are currently $41 million over the salary cap. So unless they free up a ton of space and probably unload Stephon Diggs, Evans is not going there. So when you really start to break it all down amongst teams that would need a wide receiver the caliber of Mike Evans, which you could argue that every team needs a receiver of that caliber. But when you break it down with that combination, plus the combination of money, plus the checklist that Derek Gilmore just provided that Jordan Schultz reported on. Yeah, and you go back to the Thursday conversation that I had with Evan Klosky, Mike Evans' market may not be as big or as fruitful as once thought. Gilmore's statement really narrowed down the field even more, and this could just be agent speak trying to goat teams into overbidding to convince Mike Evans to go there. But it may have the opposite effect where now teams that potentially would have been interested see what Derek Gilmore said and say, you know what? He's not going to come and play with Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not going to come and play with Derek Carr. He's not going to come play with Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson or Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky or any of those guys. And they don't even throw their hat in the ring when this time last week they probably would have. Could the Buccaneers really pivot away from what we all thought and not give Evans the chance of moving on? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Get buckets on your first bet with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, futures bets, and more. Right now, the Boston Celtics are favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 260, while defending champion Denver Nuggets are the favorites out of the Western Conference at plus 440. And FanDuel already has odds up for Super Bowl 59, where the San Francisco 49ers are the favorites at plus 500. The Kansas City Chiefs are plus 650 to go ahead and three-peat, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are tied with the New Orleans Saints, Las Vegas Raiders, Arizona Cardinals, and Seattle Seahawks at plus 7,500. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I'm sure we will have more fallout from the scouting combine that wrapped up over the weekend. But in the meantime, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN had a lot to say about the Bucs in an ESPN column he did with Dan Graziano from the scouting combine in Indianapolis. And one of the things that he mentioned was the future of Antoine Winfield Jr. Fowler said that it's expected that Winfield will receive the franchise tag by the Tuesday deadline, but that the two sides are still working on a long-term contract. Fowler also said that many that he spoke with at the combine believe that Winfield is going to reset the safety market in his new contract, regardless of whether that's with Tampa or with a different team. However, Fowler said that if the Bucs can work out a deal with Winfield Jr. and possibly Baker Mayfield in the next few days, they could tag Mike Evans. Okay. That's an absolutely terrible idea for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to go through these real quick. First, if you want to guarantee that you're going to infuriate your star receiver and guarantee that 2024 is the last season that he ever plays for you, go ahead and franchise tag him. I've talked about it plenty, but most of these players, you guys know, absolutely hate the franchise tag. You'll have rare outliers like Shaq Barrett, who was completely fine with being franchise tag and talked about how that was more money than he had made in his career. But someone of Mike Evans' stature would be irate. Word out of Indianapolis is that there is still interest and a desire for Evans to retire a Buck, but that he wants to test the market and see what's out there. If you strip that away from him, it's only going to fuel anger and resentment. Yes, there is a chance that you lose him once he tests the market, but I am telling you right now that if the Buccaneers franchise tag him, he is guaranteed to leave you next year in free agency. There would no longer be a desire to work things out and get a deal done that makes him a Buck for life. He would be gone. Second off, the franchise tag for wide receivers is $21.8 million, which is below what Evans is expected to get from the Bucs or anyone else on a long-term deal. This is the last long-term deal that he is going to get. So yes, the Bucs would save money by franchise tagging him, but again, you would piss off the player that you're forcing into playing on that 1-year deal. Can you imagine, God forbid, that Evans is forced to play on the franchise tag and then suffers a major injury, which destroys his last chance at a big payday long-term deal before his career comes to a close? That is why players hate it. There is no long-term security, and if you get injured when you're on the franchise tag, your market value plummets because you're coming off of an injury. I just cannot see the Buccaneers going down that road because they know the ramifications if they do that. However, one road that Fowler mentions that the Bucs may start to venture down relates to a different Buccaneer, and that is one that listeners and viewers of this show have brought up a couple of times, and it involves trading away cornerback Carlton Davis. Fowler said that the cornerback market was a popular position being discussed at the Combine and notes that the trade market may be a really interesting one. The Chiefs are reportedly working on a tag and trade with L'Jarius Sneed, while there were rumblings that the Lions and Dolphins both may be in the market for quote-unquote a high-end corner. Fowler mentions that many believe that New Orleans Saints corner Marshawn Lattimore is being made available for trade, while, quote, there's intrigue on Bucs corner Carlton Davis, end quote. Now, Lattimore is going to be 1,000 times easier to move than Davis is because his salary for the 2024 season is only $1.2 million. Davis is entering the final year of his contract, and his base salary is $14 million, with a dead cap of $20.3 million for the Buccaneers. I've talked about Davis being a player that the Bucs may move on from, and a post June 1st cut or trade will give the Bucs $14.3 million in cap space this year, $5.3 million in cap space next year, while adding $6 million in dead cap in 2024, then $2.6 million in dead cap in 2025, 26, and 27. If any team is going to trade for Carlton Davis, I would assume that they would want to seek permission from the Buccaneers to negotiate an extension ahead of time and lower that 2024 cap hit. If you're only trading him for that 1 year, the compensation isn't going to be very high. And I don't think the compensation is going to be very high anyway, but you're talking about the difference of a 7th round pick and potentially a 5th round pick if you are going to allow him to speak with a team that's interested about a potential contract negotiation. I think at best you're looking at a day 3 pick no matter what, but the Buccaneers only have 6 picks in the upcoming draft anyway. So any extra capital that they can acquire, especially if they're already planning on moving Davis via a release the way they did with Shaq Barrett, is going to help. But this is a situation that may start to pick up steam here over the coming weeks leading into that new league year. But I still maintain it's going to be really difficult for the Buccaneers to move Carlton Davis, especially if teams are getting wind of the fact that the Bucs are already planning on releasing him. Because if the Bucs release him, now you don't have to give up any draft capital. You can sign him to whatever deal that you want to. He has a wider range of options that he can go out to figure out where he wants to play moving forward. So again, it goes back to, if a team wants him bad enough and wants to ensure that they get him and don't lose out on him to a higher bidder, you send the draft capital to the Buccaneers and ensure that you get him, work out the long-term deal, and so on and so forth. However, I think most teams would rather just force the Bucs' hand, knowing that they're going to release him anyway, and then try to win over his affections and get him to sign with them on their own deal. It is a mock draft Monday. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It can be easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially with social gatherings picking up after the winter. I know for me, between my day job, the podcast, and traveling every weekend due to my son's schedule, I find myself drained faster and faster every day, but still having to push through in all situations, telling myself it's for the greater good, regardless of how I feel in the moment, often ignoring my own needs in service of others. Speaking to someone on the outside without a personal bias in my day-to-day life can be extremely beneficial and help me reshuffle what I view as a priority versus what should actually be a priority. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Wrapping things up here on a Monday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and it is a mock draft Monday. We have a couple of listener submissions this week, and we're going to start with Kevin, who sent this one in. I'm a big fan of it. Kevin did a 3-round mock where he takes Penn State's Chop Robinson in the first round. Second round, he takes Iowa State corner TJ Tampa, and then in the third round, he takes Michigan guard Zach Zinter. You all know that I love Chop, so there's no need to dive into that. The second round pick of TJ Tampa is an interesting one, especially after just talking about Carlton Davis potentially being traded. I have speculated that he's going to be released. Either way, the Bucs would play in 2024 without the services of Carlton Davis. Tampa is a Todd Bowles corner for sure. 6'2" with 32-inch arms. He's physical. He has great closing speed, and he is at his best when he is in press man coverage. Oh, by the way, he's from St. Pete. So you talk about a really great story there. And then you have Zach Zinter, and what an absolutely massive human being to add to the offensive line. 6'6", 310 pounds with great feet, and may be a day one starter. And I know what you're saying. James, how could the Bucs get a day one starter at guard in the third round? Well, person who is asking me that question, here's how. It's a combination of a couple of things. First, this draft is insanely deep at offensive line, especially interior offensive line. And the other part of that is that Zinter is coming off a pretty major injury. Back in November, he broke his tibia and fibula, and had he not gotten injured that late in the college football season, or had he not gotten injured at all, he would not slip down a lot of these draft boards. Maybe he still doesn't, but I think in the case here of Kevin's mock draft, that is a really solid explanation as to why he fell down that far. But because of how deep this class is, teams might err on the side of caution and not take the offensive lineman who broke his leg just 4 months ago. And then again, you bring him in, compete for that starting guard job, which I very much believe that he could probably win. You know, he can compete with Aaron Stinney if they bring him back, or whatever other free agent they may bring in to potentially slide in to left guard, but I think Zinter was an absolutely fantastic pick, especially given how great he was at Michigan. And we all know that if you're going to be an offensive lineman in Michigan, you have to be really good at run blocking. That is something that the Buccaneers desperately need. So a great pick there. Overall, I really liked those 3 picks by Kevin. Then the other mock draft was sent in on Twitter from Destined for Greatness, and he did 4 picks for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At number 26, he had Jared Verse, the edge rusher from FSU. At 63, he had Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the linebacker out of Clemson. At 89, he had Johnny Wilson, the wide receiver out of FSU. And then at 126, he had Marshawn Lloyd, the running back out of USC. Plus, in a trade down, he got the 49ers' 4th round pick in 2025. So let's go through this one a little bit. Jared Verse, that's the same as Chop Robinson. I don't need to get into that. You guys know that I love that pick. Trotter Jr. is a really interesting pick if Levante David returns. He could be a guy that competes with KJ Britt and Servassier Dennis for that other starting job that's going to be vacated by Devin White no longer being part of the Buccaneers. Then if Levante David does not come back, it's a 3-man competition for 2 starting jobs. I like him, but I'm not sure if I would have taken him here in the 2nd round. But again, I think the Bucs' interest in a inside linebacker on day 1 or day 2 of the draft weighs heavily on whether or not Levante David returns. If he doesn't, I could see this skyrocketing up the power rankings of Buccaneers needs in the draft. Then Wilson is another guy that I like, but based on the board, I might have gone another way. I was actually just talking in our Bucs Nation group chat with some of the other writers over there, saying that I would honestly be shocked if the Buccaneers used a 1st or 2nd day pick on a wide receiver. Again, that was contingent in the context of the conversation of Mike Evans returning, but the Bucs definitely need a reliable wide receiver 3 if Evans returns, and I think Wilson could fit that bill. He is a massive human being, 6'6", 230, ran a 4.52 at the combine, but I don't think if the Bucs take him that he is an automatic locked and loaded wide receiver 3. He's going to have to beat out Trey Palmer and earn that job. He has the size and the catch radius advantage, but only if he consistently wins with those traits. One of the biggest knocks on Wilson is that he is not good at contested catches. That would really need a drastic improvement if he was going to be one of the guys that's on the field as pretty much the de facto wide receiver 3 in this offense. And then finally, you have Marshawn Lloyd, the running back out of USC, and he fits one of the biggest needs on the team. You guys know I'm going to continue to pound that table for the next essentially 2 months. The Bucs need running backs. They need at least 2 of them. He ran a 4.46 at the combine, so he has speed, but he's also billed as a complementary back with big play potential as a rookie with the upside of a potential starter. He does get knocked a little bit for having below average vision, and he has already had 1 ACL surgery. That's a little bit concerning. But one of the things that coaches and GMs love about him is that he makes really, really quick cuts and changes direction, then hits top speed within a few steps. Very, very rapid movement and being able to shake opposing defenders. That would be a great compliment to what the Bucs have in Rachaad White. But again, the vision worries me because as much as I love Rachaad White, he has some vision issues at times as well. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a trait that the Bucs can coach out of him. Hasn't seemed to work really well with Rachaad White as of yet. Doesn't mean that it can't be fixed. And of course, you have Rachaad entering a contract year, so he is going to be looking to have a career year in 2024. Overall, I think both Kevin and Ricky made really, really solid picks in their mock drafts, and they both went in very different directions, which I liked because they both addressed edge rusher in the 1st round and then completely changed their approach. You had one going with linebacker, wide receiver, running back. You had another one that was focusing on corner and the trenches on the offensive side of the ball. And both of them can make great cases for why they did what they did. That's the thing about the Buccaneers draft is they do have a lot of holes to fill, but they can really play that best player available card and go in a lot of different directions in really any round in the draft. I still say edge rusher is your number one without question need. And if you have one of those edge rushers drop to you, you cannot afford to pass it up. They have to get help on the edge. And I love the fact that both Kevin and Ricky addressed that. But then you have one guy filling needs at 3 positions and you have another guy filling needs at 2 positions, and none of them were the same. Really loved those mock drafts. If you guys want to send in your mock draft, you can send them to the DMs on Twitter at Locked On Bucs. Those DMs are open. Go to your favorite draft simulator of choice. Do however many rounds you want. Take a screenshot, send the picture over that way. And of course, insiders, you can send them in via text message if you so choose. But that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Make sure you're following along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. And please make sure you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform of choice. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.